Hello, and welcome to the Narrowing Path, Walking the Spiritual Walk. My name is Steve Van Eiderstein. Thank y'all for joining me as we do the chapter review for the final chapter of the book, I Was A Pagan by V.C. Kitchen. This has been quite the journey going through this book. I've really quite enjoyed it. It's been very realigning for myself, and it's been a great reminder just about how dramatic and impactful a change can be to somebody's life. Just to see the before and the after, and to read about V.C. Kitchen's personal experience with change and recovery, and not just recovery from alcohol and substances, but recovery in all walks and areas of life has been it's been incredible, and it's all been extremely relevant in light of the current circumstances in the world, and just transitioning from a selfish, self-centered viewpoint to a God and other-centered viewpoint. It's just been a great reminder. So I'm looking forward to just doing this chapter review. And yeah, I still can't believe we went through the entire book. That's pretty awesome. Thank you all for joining me for that ride. I also want to say thank you, everybody, for the support you've been giving me on social media. This includes the YouTube shorts, the YouTube videos, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of those places you can find us. Give us a like, a follow, a subscribe, whatever is appropriate. I would love to get your feedback as well. We're almost to 100 subscribers on YouTube. That's pretty cool. Never thought you'd get 100 of that. I don't know. Just kind of something cool to get started. So I'm glad people are being receptive to it in some small way. So I'm really grateful for that. So thank you for that. So I just want to point this out. This is the original copy I usually read out of for the chapter readings, just so you can get a clear picture of it. Right. And then what I do the reviews out of is this book. This is the Believing in False Gods, I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen. It's just a republished facsimile reprint. Literally, it's page for page exactly the same, literal copies of the pages from this book. So go ahead, get yourself a copy, read through it on your own, and or follow along with all the readings. I'm obviously going to be leaving them up on YouTube for anybody that would like to just go through them later on. So thank you, everybody, for the support. So let's go ahead and we'll get into it. So this final chapter is chapter 18, and it's called This Business of Getting Back to God. And the subtitle is Destiny. And I feel like that's such a big word, isn't it? Destiny. What is that? And how do we find that, like purpose and those types of things? It's, there's a little bit of that, about that in here. This whole chapter is about next steps and moving forward. So there's a lot of good stuff to talk about here. So I'm looking forward to it. And I'm just gonna say he opens up with in this chapter with talking about how when he first started getting into this whole spirituality thing and this whole business of seeking God and seeking God's will for his life, he wanted to kind of soft play it a little bit, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's kind of a big thing to digest, isn't it? It's kind of a big step to take to say, hey, I want to actually completely devote myself in my entirety to following this path that's been placed before me, that has been suggested that I do. I just kind of want to dip my toes in the water. And he talks about how I think it's a priest, right? A speaker said, if I don't go all the way, if you don't go far enough for the joy of it, for the joy of actually seeking this, then you better just not go at all. It's that statement of you're going to do this or you're not going to do this. There's really no in between at this point, guys, because you remember V.C. Kitchen, when he got to this place, he was broken. He hadn't lost materially everything. He was still married. He still had his kids. He still had money, but spiritually he was just destroyed. Right. So he still wanted to go play around with this whole thing. He still wanted to just give it a taste test. He didn't want to have that full commitment to the whole thing, right? He just wanted to take the initial actions, and he talked about that, how he just wanted to have that same circumstance happen that happened when he was in grade school, where he would just take the initial actions, like he had that single experience with God, but he didn't follow through. He didn't take any additional actions. He didn't talk about take any of the growth steps that we've talked about in recent chapters with this too. He didn't continue to pursue that relationship with God, right? And what that turns into is he wasn't actually truly helpful to anybody, right? He wasn't actually able to be of service to anybody in his life. He wasn't actually helpful. And he never even thought about why he should be. He didn't even see the point of it, right? And that's what he opens this chapter with. And then he goes right into how it's actually the true meaning of life is to be of service to God and others. The true meaning of life is to actually show them this new way of living, this spiritual lifestyle, this fulfillment that we get from actually seeking and doing God's will in our life, right? God of your understanding too. I want to reiterate that. This is meant to be very open and roomy for anybody to follow along. So whatever you want to use in place of that word God, the path you're following, whether it's a source, creative energy, universe, Mother Nature, or another deity, or religious practice, please feel free to hear whatever word you need to hear, and go with whatever practice that you have. But it's pretty amazing to understand, to see him go from living a completely selfish and self-centered life to going to having such a profound experience to say, actually, the true meaning of life is to be of service to God and to show love to his other children and show them this connection too. So let's go ahead and we'll get into first quote I wanted to read on page 261. And after he's talked about making this transition and bringing other people into this transition, right? How do we continue to develop, right? What are we supposed to be doing after we've found this way of life, after we've had this experience? Where are we supposed to be going, right? And this is page 261 for those who are following along. In man's development, similarly, Christ's efforts seem to have centered in building self-sacrifice, fellowship, and obedience, the qualities we must have in order to pick up more and more of God's love and thus fulfill the fundamental reason for being, right? So those are three big words there: self-sacrifice, fellowship, and obedience, right? So we have to be willing to set aside our own selfish desires, our own self-will, our own self-seeking nature, right? To find and connect with other people, and then also continue to be obedient and of service and submit to this higher power, this God of our understanding. That's how we actually continue to grow. That's how we actually continue to move forward in our spiritual progress, to move forward and continue to build in this life that we're supposed to be building, right? How we're supposed to actually fulfill this purpose of showing people this path. We can't have just that singular experience. We've talked about this. We have to continue to pursue that growth, and that's through self-sacrifice, fellowship, and obedience. Not things most of us like, actually, at the end of the day. We like to do what we want to do. We like to be the center of attention or the most important person in the room. We like to be in charge, masters of our own destiny. But this is about actually following the destiny set before us. And in a way you are. You get to choose. Will you live out this selfish and self-centered lifestyle and walk this path of destruction that has brought you to this place? Or will you choose the path God's laid out for you, which involves being of service to him and to be of service to others in your life, and to build people up and to connect them to this power where they find true meaning, fulfillment, peace, and happiness? Right? So you get to choose the path, but the path is laid before you. I really enjoy that he kind of buttons the whole thing up too in this, in another paragraph here. Actually, right after that first one we read on 261, I'm going to read a good chunk of this chapter actually again. Like probably almost a full page right now, because he just talks about where he came from and where he went to and where he is now, and just the difference between it. And I relate to it so much, because that's how I used to be. In the beginning of this is how I used to be. And then I've had a similar journey as he has. So I wanted to just read it again. This is page 261, the last paragraph here. As a pagan, for example, I wanted comfortable surroundings and narcotics for my body, comfortable opinions for my mind, and comfortable religious assurance for my soul. So he's just instantly going into this whole thing saying, hey, all I wanted was things to have to do with me. I just wanted to be comfortable. I didn't want to be challenged at all. I just wanted to feel good all the time, just pleasure and things that agreed with me. Like, that's all I was looking for. And I relate to that. That's really what I wanted in the beginning of my life, too, or in the beginning of my life, for up until I started this journey. Christ, however, taught me that while my heart, mind, and soul were filled with such desires, there would be no room for God's love to flow into them. He taught me his first great commandment, that I must love the Lord my God with all my heart and all my mind and all my soul. That, in other words, I must surrender my alcohol, my tobacco, and my ladies. I must surrender my self-glorifying philosophies and surrender my easy religion. So everything he knew, he had to actually surrender, right? All his old thinking, all his old behaviors, all his old desires, all his old ideas about how to live, right? Right there was just like suddenly, I've got to throw all this out the window. Then only, so after he's realized he has to change all of that, then only could I begin to experience a moral exaltation far greater than any physical pleasure I had ever experienced, a peace and contentment of mind far greater than any intellectual satisfaction I had ever found, and a contact of my soul with the Holy Spirit such as I had never known at all. So he had to admit to these things. He had to be willing to change these things. And then he found a way of living that he never even knew was possible. Right? He found this way of life that was completely different than what he was used to doing, and he went from a self-serving life to a others-serving life, to a God-serving life, a life of service, that he took himself out of the middle of the equation and he gave himself the opportunity to be of service to somebody else. And he found this joy that he could never actually extract from all of his old ways of living and behaviors. It's a pretty powerful thing, right? And he then goes on to say he had to really learning how to properly love his neighbor, right? To actually properly, to the fullest extent, give that type of love and care and affection, and what was actually needed to help someone grow, to introduce them to this new way of living. And it wasn't the material, right? It wasn't just paying for someone's bills or buying them food or this and that. That's all kind, and that's all good things, but that's all temporary stuff. That's all just things that will bring a relief. It won't bring an actual connection, right? That actual growth, right? He talks about how it was more about him sharing himself rather than sharing his things. He shared him in his entirety, is what he said, sins and all, right? He was able to bear an honest picture of his soul. And when you can do that, you can connect with another human being. Right? He had to make himself available to connect with somebody else, to connect with his neighbor, to be a part of someone else's life. And now when we're talking about this, like it just really brings me back to 12-step recovery, but also a lot of clinical recovery about finding that genuine authenticity and just that willingness to share with somebody else, that willingness to allow somebody else to share with you, to connect with them, to actually see them as a complete and whole person in their entirety, and then accept them for that. To remove that judgment, to remove those barriers of desire to impress them or to be in competition with them, even, right? We had to just go into it completely open and honestly into these interactions. And suddenly you find this connection that allows you to grow and change and be a whole new person that you didn't know was possible, right? And he goes into talking about how he was only able to do that by following the Beatitudes that were taught in the Bible. And I did a series on Emmett Fox's Sermon on the Mount, and he talks about the same things, right? He talks about having to be poor in spirit and let God into himself. He talks about meekness and not egotistical. And then he can see God everywhere, right? He can see God in the lowliest of places, right? And other people and other things. And he got to see this whole different world that was always in front of him, but he just couldn't actually get out of the way long enough to actually see it. He couldn't get out of the way long enough to actually recognize and acknowledge the fact that God was right there with him the whole time. Right? So the Beatitudes were a very big thing. And like I said, Emmett Fox, he had a big role to play in the establishment of 12-step communities too. And I believe had a very direct impact on the Oxford group as well. You remember this, that's where VC Kitchen found this new way of living, was in the Oxford group. So it's all kind of mixed in together. So when I see these, it just gives me a throwback to when we went through that. Emmett Fox, Sermon on the Mount, it's a great playlist. Really enjoyed that, going over that chapter of the book, actually, the Beatitudes. So check it out. Let me know what you think. But I wanted to go into another paragraph right now on page 263 where he makes another reference to, he says a term that Emmett Fox used, that James Allen's used, which we both authors that we've covered on this podcast before too. So yeah, it's on page 263, the second paragraph there. So it is when I will let him that God is shaping me towards the Christ-like character. This is not because he wants me to be good, as I wanted my children to be good, in order to not annoy me. It is because achievement of that character is the only way I can achieve receptivity to love. Now that's a big statement right there, guys, right? That is a huge statement. And the term that I was emphasizing there was Christ-like character, right? Because when we go through the sacrifice of self, when we start to let go of our old ideas and all of our selfish and self-centered and self-seeking motives and thoughts, and we're rebuilding our character and our perspective and our view on life, right? When we actually go through that process, and we have to have something to aim at, which is that Christ-like character, that righteous living, that righteous character, right? That character based on ideal and principle and virtue, where we're headed. And yeah, Emmett Fox talks about this. James Allen talks about this. This is a concept that can't be overlooked, right? And then he says he needs to do this to actually be receptive to love. And he has to be receptive to love, he goes on to say, so he can actually give that love out. What we find, or at least what I've found in my experience with working in recovery and having a spiritual journey and walking this path and growing and actually finding these truths, in my life, was being able to actually discover what love meant, what love really was, what that was to actually connect with that God of my understanding, that power greater than myself, and to receive that. And once I received it, I could actually give it away. I could actually give it to somebody else, right? But it wasn't until I went through and I took these actions and I started this journey that I was able to actually even realize I was missing that. I thought I had it. I thought I knew what it meant. I thought I had some concept of what it was talking about, but I really didn't. And when I did this and I was able to receive that love, I was able to actually, like he talks about here, go all in with this God of my understanding, this power greater than myself, and to fulfill that purpose we were talking about earlier of love and connection, to lift up our neighbor, to connect with them, and to show them this different way of life, right? That's what we're doing here. So he goes on to say, like he goes on to this kind of different portion after this, and he's just stressing the importance of God in all ways, right? And how we need to get back to God in all areas of our life, which is something we've talked about regularly on this podcast, which putting God in service and to others at the center of the life, because what that does is it takes us out of the middle. It takes me out of the center of attention, takes my ego out of the limelight, and emphasizes something better, something to work towards and to achieve. And we need to actually continue to move forward with this, right? Because if we don't, we've already seen actually what happens. And I'm going to read this real quick. It's page 264. The inevitable failure that can be followed only by harsh dictatorship or dreary period of socialization, equally oppressive and equally futile attempts to strap a governmental straitjacket on human greed. In struggling to attain or to retain any man-made systems, the world is simply striving to maintain a system of self-love. And in subscribing to any such system, we are simply buying a ringside seat for the world's greatest tragedy, the disintegration of civilization. Now that's huge stuff right there. And the first part of that paragraph that I read, the inevitable failure can be followed only by harsh dictatorship or dreary period of socialization, right? Like this is what's constantly being talked about. We're either over here, we're over here. And depending on what side you're picking, we're at one of those two already. And you're blaming the other side for the other, right? Like it's huge clash that's going on right now. And it's exactly what he talked about. This was written 100 years or 95 years ago, guys. Like this was a problem back then that they foresaw, right? And I don't know where we are, but I know it's very close to this. If it's not this, right? Are we watching the disintegration of this society right now? Or are we watching us shoot ourselves in the foot? It doesn't matter which side you're on. There's many on both sides that would say, yes, we are. And that's terrifying to me. To actually sit here and say, we know what the problem is. I mean, this gives us a clear diagnosis of what the problem is that we are so selfish and self-centered, that we are so self-involved that we can't actually do anything else but just destroy ourselves, right? And he talks about, I love how he brings this word up because I think it's so overly used and it's just so incorrect. We're trying to maintain a system of self-love, right? We're just putting ourselves at the middle of this whole thing and just saying we're the most important. Self-love. This is where we got to be. This is what has to be prioritized. Care for yourself. Self-love. Love yourself. Love yourself. It's narcissistic, guys. And what it's going to do is it's going to destroy us. Right? We're just going to become so self-obsessed where we're just going to, the bottom's going to fall out. And we're going to start over again. Just like so many civilizations and societies before us have had to start over again. Because we haven't learned the lesson yet, I guess. So it's still, we have this human tendency to prioritize our own self-centered ego. And then we forget about God, and we don't put God and others first. And we don't actually prioritize love, kindness, justice, sincerity, peace, hope, faith. There's a lot of things that we stop caring about when we put ourselves in the middle of the universe. And then things just kind of go downhill from there. This is why God needs to be at the center, why Christ needs to be at the center, why the universe, that source, that power, that greater than yourself, whatever it is, whatever you believe, as long as it's not us, needs to be at the center. We become very self-absorbed. We could become very self-obsessed. And then guess what? We'll just rot the bottom out. We need a better target than just a generic one that's solely there to suit ourselves and our selfish purposes. And that's what we get when we choose to actually be of service to this power greater than ourselves. It's pretty amazing to see what can actually happen. So what he does is, in the next few pages, he just goes over the injection of Christ into the world again, and the injection of God into this world again, and how it needs to be prioritized by so many. And he actually starts talking about how when you start living this way of life, you're going to be met with a constant criticism. And this is from the people you would expect it from, but this is also from many people you wouldn't expect it from, meaning those who you thought were also following a same path as you, those who you thought were going to be walking right beside you. But when you pursue a true dedication to a God of your understanding, people will look at you and question you. You'll believe you're doing it wrong. You believe you're taking it too far. You're taking it too seriously, right? But when you're coming from a place that VC Kitchen has come from, where a place where I have come from, and you actually start to find this different way of living, all you want to do after you get a taste of that is to let the old go. You realize how much you've missed in life. You've realized how delusional you were, how much you need to actually embrace a change and actually embrace a different way of living, right? And he talks about how what happened to him. He became criticized and outcast almost from some friend groups and some situations, right? But what he found walking this way of life was happiness. He found peace. He found appreciation for life. He found a true sense of beauty in all things. He found love. He found fellowship with those that are going in that same way, right? So we lose a lot of things. We lose a lot of stuff that doesn't really necessarily even matter, but it pains us to lose them, that sacrifice of those things we thought we cared about, or we did care about, but we shouldn't have maybe, right? But once you're through it and you find the other side, you'll understand that those things were always supposed to be temporary. We just tried to make them permanent. And he talks about next how just this whole change in the world and society is going to come at an individual level. And we've talked about that a little bit before, that if you want to change the schools, you got to change the teachers themselves. If you want to change the churches, you got to change the pastors, right? If you want to change if you want to change politics and the government, you got to change the politicians, right? It's going to come on a change level of individual basis. And then people will bring that with them into the world, into their lives, into whatever capacities that they actually have. And when they do that, the change will be from the ground up. It'll come from an internal source, and then suddenly virtues and values and principles will get reinstituted in these systems. All systems too. I mentioned the big federal ones, but we're talking about businesses. We're talking about family units. We're talking about just friend groups, right? We're talking about every area that we get to participate in will be changed on an individual, person to person, personal journey and personal growth. And that will allow them to actually explore this world a little bit more and to actually bring a change in this world instead of watching civilization crumble and the selfishness and self-centeredness drive us insane. So he talks about how he has to go on his journey, and especially at the beginning, it's a walk in faith, right? It's just you begin to walk, and you begin to believe, and then you grow in faith and knowledge and knowing, and you do it with merely the guarantee of the ones that came before you, with the desperation of a knowing that you need to change. But you go that route anyway. And now I'm going to reread the last paragraph of this book, starting on page 270. He has reared me, speaking of Christ and God in this situation, he has reared me to a point where spiritually I am of age. There, he has left me free to choose. We talked about that. I can choose his love or choose my own way, responding to those forces of inertia, disintegration, and decay which would pull me back towards the nothingness from whence I came. There surely would I find that the wages of sin is death, but I have chosen the other way. I have tasted the joys of walking with Christ, and any other course by contrast is intolerably painful. I no longer can stand to breathe the other air. My thanks to the Oxford group who led me to Christ, and to Christ who is leading me to God. So there we go. That's the end of this chapter. It's the end of this book. Fantastic book. Loved it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And I hope you all did too. And you really have to ask yourself, what path will you choose? I've seen many begin their journey in this world and begin their journey on this path. And they'll get started. And they'll have an experience. And then they stop. And they get pulled back into that nothingness, that decay you talked about. That selfishness and self-centeredness is just so tempting sometimes for folks. And they miss it even. But he talks about in there, and it's been my experience, that now I can't even contemplate breathing that air. Knowing what I know now, I would never want to go back. This life has blessed me with more than I could ever imagine, more than I probably deserve, more than I deserve. And I have an extreme amount of gratitude for that. So when you hear this book, and when you hear him say he was reared and then he had to choose, like I said earlier, what destiny will you walk towards? The one of self-centeredness and destruction and pain for yourself and others, or the one of love, of service, and of self-sacrifice, and to get a life you never knew was possible. So that's going to be it for this book. Thank you so much. And next week, I will be posting a video regarding what's going to be coming up next. I'm going to keep that as a surprise until then. I'm looking forward to it, though. We're going to change it up a little bit, change up the format a little bit, back to something similar to Emmett Fox, a little bit shorter readings. But I'm going to I'm thoroughly excited for it. It's a book that's had extremely large impact on my progress. These books that we've initially read, James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, Emmett Fox, Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes specifically, and then this Believing in False Gods, I Was a Pagan, really was something that helped me get started and see the depth and the amount of change I had to make. This next book pointed out specific things. We're going to read one chapter out of it that opened my eyes to some deep-seated stuff that needed to change. So I'm excited to bring that to you. So thank you all so much for following along with this book, and I look forward to the next stage of this whole thing. So until next time, thanks.